Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. I'm your host, Duncan Alney, here, where we speak to leading entrepreneurs of CEOs of mission-driven food and beverage brands. And this episode is brought to you by Firebelly. At Firebelly, we make brands more likable and profitable through social media marketing. That's all we do, everybody. 100% social media marketing. We were voted one of the top social media marketing agencies in the world by Clutch. Firebelly's helped clients like Netflix, Qdoba, Fiji Water, and so many others transform their social media approach. If you want to make your brand more likable and profitable, let's talk. Go to firebellymarketing.com or contact us at hello@firebellymarketing.com. But today, my friends, I'm so excited because I have a colleague and a mentor and someone I respect very much, Marty McDonald, who is the co-founder and CEO of Bad Rhino. I mean, the man is a walking badass. He has the best operational insights into running a company. And I think if the title had not already been taken, his next book would be called No Bullshit Social Media. So he has grown his company. He's the author of Great Beer is Not Enough, and also the host of the Taps and Teas podcast, which is just a very insightful podcast. He leads the day-to-day operations at his company, and they have recently grown significantly, and they're doing a lot more things. A bit more on Bad Rhino. I mean, they're one of the top social media marketing agencies in the country, and they do all kinds of amazing stuff with community management, branding, all the different channels, listening, analytics, everything you'd expect. They're top agency on Clutch. So, I mean, Marty, I am just so thankful that you're here today. Welcome.
I'm going to record that intro, Duncan, and play it every morning. You know, and just Marty McDonald is a badass, right? And then just kind of keep rolling into it. That was awesome. I appreciate it, man. It's always been good. For those that may not know, like Duncan and I have been in a mastermind group for a couple of years and gotten to know each other. So I always look forward to talking to people in that group and outside of that group. And Duncan and Firebelly have been growing, and I appreciate everything you say, but we're all in the same game. Whether you're a smaller agency, you're just starting out, or you're getting bigger, it's just all in the way that you focus in on your clients and you do good work. And I think anybody that's doing that, and I know Duncan takes pride in that, and it's an honor to be here, man. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Love it, Marty. Love it. And I forgot to mention that you love all things craft beer and all things golf. And I mean, the guy. What's that?
There's no beer, but you can see golf all over. I got my U.S. Open. I got my Pinehurst images. My clubs are actually right here too. They just arrived back from North Carolina, which was nice. And they'll be shipped out sooner or later for another golf trip, I'm sure.
Awesome. So let me ask this, Marty. You guys have had quite a journey. And now you guys are have expanded into a full-fledged digital agency. And I guess my question to you is what role does social play in digital marketing overall, in your world?
It's a great question. When we started 11 years ago, it was like, we got a lot of weird looks. Like, you're doing what? Right. And those looks, I think, were rooted in a spot where, if you can take yourself back to 2010, where basically Facebook was there and Twitter, and you had LinkedIn, and it was like, well, why focus in on social? And it was like, well, this is where things are going, where the conversations are. And there was barely an ad platform on Facebook. Really, it wasn't. And what we saw were people were getting organic results very, very well. And I come from more of like a paid direct response type marketing. That's where I learned. That's where I did all my affiliate stuff. That's where I got my first couple of clients as a freelancer way back in 2002, and did that as a hobby because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process and all that. And when Rich came to me and said, like, here's what I have, because he had his own brand that he built 100% on social. And I was like, all right, I'm like, maybe, and we started to go through it. And when we started, I was like, all right, this makes sense to try. And what we thought when we first started was that we would get a handful of clients, and those clients would learn from us marketing concepts of how to build all the copy, how to have those conversations, how to build a community, right? Then from there, they would hire somebody because we're like, this is going to be big. We just don't know how or where it's going to go. It's just totally tied into internet marketing, right? And we started out. And then, to answer your question is in 4 years, as we continue to grow, and it was around 2014, we had people come to us and say, we need you to do our website. We're like, we don't do websites. And then they were like, well, you got to figure it out because you're our agency and we want one agency. Right. And we were like, okay. So we have partners that do that. We have some in-house people now that do that as well. But the main focus was always still social. But as the internet and, whatever you want to call it, social media, digital, all of that in this big soup keeps becoming more and more of a whole process, which is lumped into digital, right? And I think the glue, I've always said this, the glue that ties your marketing together is social media in a way where people can go and they can interact with people in your organization, or they can bitch about a product, or they had the worst hamburger in the world, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It gives them a voice, right? But if you don't monitor that voice and use that to your advantage, and what I mean by advantage is get the feedback. Like if they had a bad experience, and like, let's address it. And some people love that. And then other brands are like, no, we just want to post and have this stuff go out. All our other marketing will take care of itself. And some brands can do that. But how it ties together is really where we've seen the most success, and where clients come to us, I would say since about 2017-ish, is we're looking at them holistically. They may only hire us after the fact for one or two pieces. Like, hey, that's great. We did the whole review, like a CMO kind of study, walk through a process for 8 to 12 weeks. Sometimes it's condensed. Sometimes it's a little bit longer. Then we say, okay, this is what we recommend. This is how we would do it. We can do this for you, or you can do it yourself. And when we've done that, what we see is the glue that kind of holds a lot of it together is social. So that's kind of where we're at, at 2:43 Eastern, August 11th, 2021, right? I mean, by 3:15, that could all change in this game.
I mean, I love it though. It makes so much sense to me, as being kind of like colleagues in this industry and like walking this road together. What you say is totally like truth, because there's no other forum where brands or companies can enter as easily, and also where they can monitor their customers and they can invite, our buddy Chris Dreyer calls it voice of the customer, right? And I saw that big long post of his today about the voice of the customer and how do you get it. The important thing about social is that it's unedited and it's transparent, and you can also solve problems transparently. You can give praise transparently. It just is a direct connect. And I think that's where some brands miss the boat, right? I think that's what you're alluding to, is the ones that don't do it. It's a missed opportunity because you don't have the ability to build social proof on how you treat your customers.
Yeah, it's not even how you treat them. Like you can have an e-commerce brand where there's no interaction with people like in person, right? And when somebody says like, hey, I got these, sunglasses and the case came and I wanted a brown case versus a black case, right? And, you figure out the cost and you send that back. But then you realize in your sales process, you know what? We should ask if they want that, right? And now you have a better buyer experience and you eliminate that. And we call it just developing an FAQ over time. And when we develop that FAQ is where clients are most appreciative of it. They see it and they go, where can we eliminate this? If we're getting a lot of complaints here, or in a positive way, we're getting a lot of praise, where can we increase that? And it is a two-way street, and you can argue the pluses and minuses to it, but there's always something there to listen to.
That's amazing. So what are you excited about in terms of like what's happening now? There's so much, obviously there's so much going on with Facebook and Instagram, and there's pathways through it. I mean, despite all the doom and gloom, there's pathways through it. And we're seeing sort of this meteoric rise of TikTok with no clear, monetization strategy for a lot of brands. Reddit suddenly, got like a chief monetization officer, and who knows what else is going on. Twitter seems to be enjoying a resurgence. What are you excited about platform-wise, and what are your thoughts, about where consumer brands should be looking?
It's so funny is working in social media. Um, I mean, I love the idea, the concept. I remember when I first started getting on Twitter, I love the conversations that went back and forth. And I'm like, this is cool. Like, this is neat. And then it just morphs into like everything else. It just becomes a bunch of noise, but you can refine that and fine tune it. What I'm most excited about, going forward is, I just going back to that Twitter example, like when they first come out, I'm like the guy that was always like enamored by it. Facebook, even a little bit different for Facebook by the way it was kind of out. I had to get in there early. I'd actually asked my sister for an invite because she was the only one that I knew that was still in college. And now there's a creepy older brother because I had to do research on it for a job. I mean, that was like 2005, 4 even, I think. I had to do research for a job that I was at, 2006 maybe at the latest. But we were like doing all these things, and it's cool because you can see it like evolve, right? Now I look at it, and you brought up TikTok. So let's just go back a little bit and you look at Instagram, right? I mean, Facebook bought Instagram because they were just irritated. They were just like, we're going to buy you whether you want to or not. And he also tried to buy Snapchat as well. But what you see is that evolution of it. And I think that's the most fun to see, where I get clients all the time or potential clients as well. And they're like, we want to leverage TikTok. And I was like, great. How do you want to do that? And they were like, well, we want to do this, this, and this. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm like, how are you going to monetize? We don't know. Right. And I said, well, yeah. I'm like, it's true. I'm like, because there's not there. But it takes me back to Facebook. How are we going to monetize that? Twitter. How are we going to monetize that? There were a lot of times where you were just like, they're not there yet. And the same thing with Snapchat. Unless you're a huge brand, like Snapchat's difficult. It's not impossible. Like TikTok is hard at the moment because they don't have it. You brought up Reddit. Like Reddit is making more of a resurgence because I think people love that forum environment. That forum environment for a certain demographic, and I would put myself in there, is a convenient, easy way to get some information, consume it, read it, maybe click a link or two, do some more research, and then engage. Whereas TikTok's like, what just happened? Snapchat's like, okay, I got a headache, right? Even in their like produce content, which I actually think is pretty cool. And you can just go by age group. In our age group, Duncan, people like 16 by 9. If you flipping it around, younger crowds like that. Like they're on the phone. So they love like the way things will look rather than like this. And big brands caught on to that years ago, like 5-6 years ago. So like TikTok has a place, Snapchat has a place, Instagram has a place, right? But whenever you go into it, you always want to understand where client or prospective client wants to get out of it, because they can waste a ton of time by spending the time on the wrong channel because their audience isn't there or they just don't have the right content developed for there. And what makes it more exciting for me about what's coming is I think you're starting to see like everybody start to like refine what social media is. Like people will complain all day long, right? Facebook sucks, but people are still there. A lot of them.
Yeah.
Twitter sucks, gives me a headache. People are still there. One of the biggest sources for executives to get their news on the fly. It still is. Like in polls and research, like if you're trying to attract an executive to see your content, run an ad on Twitter and they'll see it, as long as you're doing it right. But a lot of executives and people that are on the move and not just, physically, because we're still like pandemic life and there's not as much travel, but they like to flip through there because it just gives them a glimpse into what's going on. And I think you're going to see that more channel specific things that people are going to start moving towards. And the last thing I'll say, like, makes it exciting is you're seeing the death of TV as a medium in a way, not the actual physical box, plasma, whatever screen is sitting on your wall. Not that, but instead of that, it's like you almost have like your monitor in front of you on a computer, on your laptop or desktop. And what you're seeing is the way that information goes. People want to choose. That's why like Netflix became immensely popular and Amazon Prime. But now when you look at how you're choosing from Hulu and Disney Plus and HBO Max and Showtime and all these things, all they're doing is putting you into a channel. And now it's like, how do I reach the consumer that way? And how do I get there? And social media is starting to bleed in. You look at one of my favorite brands, and Barstool Sports is really getting into actually producing live events, possibly even getting some of the bigger leagues and broadcasting games and having a different slant on it, because people are tired of having the content the same way. And I see the evolution now is like you're in the early forms of, okay, TV, you had 3 or 4 channels to start and a bunch of antennas, right? And then it moved into like, oh, there's a new service, it's cable, because now the cable is laid across the country. We can plug it into the back. Now you can get movies, you can get this, you can get that, but you only have a choice of 50 channels. Oh my God, 50 channels, right? Now, like a standard like package on cable gives you like 300 channels. But now you're seeing it across the internet. And that to me gets me more excited about how people consume content, whether it's YouTube and all the others. I mean, it's interesting for sure. So there's a lot of opportunities, what I see, both for brands, both for small business, and then obviously an agency helping guide and tie that all together. Long-winded answer, but a great question.
Oh, I love it. I love it. One of the kernels or the pieces of wisdom that I pulled out of that is that it's a great opportunity for a brand to take the reins and publish for themselves, right? It's like, yeah, you can use the platform, like back in the day, like, the airwaves with the platform, and brands weren't necessarily like owning their publishing. They were advertising on other people's publishing. Now it's like, hey, Red Bull I think Red Bull is more of a publishing company than it is a sports company, right? I mean,
Yep.
And I love what you're saying, because essentially, I think the monetization is maybe not in dollars. It's like, I guess what a venture capitalist would call pre-monetization, but we're looking at like monetization through non-traditional means. It's like, are people seeing your content? Who saw it? How did they see it? Where did they see it? How can we follow them around? And I love Pinterest, man, because I feel like anything that gets my clients to diversify their risk, right? And Pinterest, the people at Pinterest, they're eager to help. They're available. They know what the hell they're doing. There's Pinterest accounts don't get hacked as much, at least. So love that idea about brand as publisher. I know with the love you have for craft beer. What's happening in the craft beer space with social and with publishing?
I think that's a good question, in an industry that evolving into that. And I think you're seeing the same exact thing as like with you have like Red Bull. There's a handful of brands. I'm not going to mention them. Some of them we do work with, but they really took to that content idea, right? So, maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot here a little bit, but getting a beer brand to move isn't that hard on social. Now, the numbers, the vanity numbers, likes, engagements, all that, not too difficult. Getting people from there to a tap room or to request their beer somewhere or buy it or do something, that's a little bit more challenging. And it was way more challenging now than it was pre-pandemic, right? So when you put those things together, the brands that are starting to create more stories, starting to wrap video rather than just being like, hey, it's a cool beer or whatever, they're starting to get a little entertainment, doing like infotainment type stuff where they're, hey, these are the types of hops and this is our goofy brewer and this is what we're doing and this is how we do it. This is what we really like to do. And they're educating while they're entertaining. And that sort of stuff seems to play the best. Bigger brands don't have to worry about that in the beverage industry to a certain degree, in craft beer, but the smaller ones that are doing it, I'm seeing like not only stuff that's like, okay, that's fun, right? All right, that's neat to see and holds my attention, but it's also producing an ROI for them. And it takes a lot of time, but it's stuff I've been preaching for almost 5 years, but a lot of people didn't necessarily listen. But once they got into it and they see it and they're like, this is getting more ROI for us than anything else, because people are like, dude, those are the guys with the funny video. Those are the guys that actually taught me the difference between Galaxy hops and all the other ones. These are the guys that taught me this. These are the girls that started their own brewery from here, right? These are the guys that came from nothing and started this. Here's their story, why they named their beers, rather than just, hey, this is a really goofy name or cool name. They're putting stories behind everything. Marketing 101, but through new medium, right? And that's really what's working in craft beers, like having a story, having different modes of content and different versions, written, great visuals and video, and standard stuff to a certain thing, but actually having a plan to implement it and monetize it as well as measure it.
I mean, I love that insight. Infotainment is so amazing. I mean, and you could say that the brands that do it well on TikTok are the ones that are kind of ruling TikTok because they're funny, but they're also getting that message across. I mean, not the pure dance stuff, right? Which it's all changing, right? But and telling stories. I mean, I love it when breweries talk about who's the master brewer, what's their story, why do they like certain flavors or certain varietals. It's like it's so sticky because then I'm laying in bed and I'm remembering this stuff. It's like, how else are you ever? My cat decided to visit. How else are you ever going to get that kind of visibility into a brand? But the stories, I love it. And I one of the things I appreciate about you, Marty, is even I remember the first retreat we were at together, and there was somebody asked some smart ass question, and you told a story, and then you gave the insight. And sometimes I feel like I remember that story was what interns actually, and I remember the story, and I forgot the insight. But the story, when you think about the story, you remember the insight, And so storytelling is such a wonderful thing for brands. What are you seeing in terms of I guess this kind of remixing phenomena where people are publishing on TikTok, it's going nowhere on TikTok, but then they're using that same content with the TikTok logo and everything on Instagram, or they're using stuff from Snap on Facebook or wherever. Yeah. It's interesting, right? It's a blending of different platforms.
I get it, but just learn how to do it from a standpoint where you're not using the logos, right? Kind of you can just tell it's like, oh, well, this video did great on TikTok. Let's put it here and here and here and skip multiple steps. And you're like, okay, the one thing I don't like from brands, small or large, or even small businesses, when they get sloppy. And then, well, we tried it, didn't work. Okay.
But did you really try it?
Did you really try it? Right. It's let's just say TikTok is a casual wedding, right? So people are real relaxed. And let's just say Instagram is the formal wedding where everyone's in black tie. And basically what you're doing is somebody's watching a nice little advertisement on Instagram in their stories, and they see a nice thing and it comes from XYZ company. And they say, oh my God, that's kind of nice. I know this is an ad, but this is actually an interesting video. And then they tap or whatever. Not necessarily go to the ad, but they're watching it. It's part of their entertainment, right? Then they watch a couple other videos. And then there's a sponsored one that comes up and it's just oh, it's a company here. And then you're like, oh, that's interesting. And they follow you. And then next thing you know, in your stories, it's constantly a TikTok thing. And then a half a Snapchat. And then this. And it's just why are you blending content like that? I'm not saying you should repurpose content, repurpose it everywhere. Everybody does it smart. It's a smart agency way to do it. Hey, we shoot this, we're doing this podcast, right? You had told me earlier, it's podcast, the audio go out on different channels that are going to work for audio. You're going to have a blog post, you're going to have some probably written word on there, a video slapped in there. And maybe you take the video and you splice it up and you put different things on Instagram and YouTube, etc. And that's perfectly fine. But I wouldn't expect you to take this little shot on Zoom, whether it's 16 by or vertical or horizontal 16 by 9, and then just slap it into TikTok or somewhere else where it's just crammed all over the place. Does it happen? Yeah, sometimes it happens, because like the video formats don't really work, but like just taking it from one to the next, something that works on TikTok might work on Snapchat, and it might work on Instagram Reels. But I'm gonna tell you, the video that you download that has the logos on it, it's just gonna look pure silly and unprofessional. And that's how you want your brand. So be it. If you're actually doing it from a branding and advertising perspective, spend a little time and don't be sloppy. From a personal standpoint, who cares? Like, you're doing it from that just entertaining your friends or family or whatever. But yeah, the sloppiness of that drives me a little nuts. And I just don't know why people would do it other than just lazy, or they just don't know how.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Also, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on this sort of like, when social media started, like when we were getting into it in 2007, and before that in MySpace and early days of Twitter, where it was like, man, people were live tweeting and like lots of like back and forth, and there was a sense of energy and fun to it, and everything wasn't overthought, and it was kind of like the Wild West, right? But now, like, I think my concern is for people and brands is a lot of the stuff that was said, like in 2007 or 8 or 9 or 10, does that should brands and maybe more importantly, people that are brands be going back to look at all that stuff and say, hey, what the fuck did I say? Funny that I would say that. What the fuck did I say? Like, 12 years ago, that's going to come and bite me in my ass later.
Yeah. I think a couple of things. Well, first off, like I've preaching that for years before like internet stuff is like, don't say anything on the internet or anywhere that you wouldn't say to somebody in person, right? I mean, that's just like common sense. Like, come on, like you're not gonna sit there and I mean, some people might, but I mean, then you're just an asshole, right? Like, I mean, no, seriously, like, it's the truth, right? I think where the weirdness comes in is somebody says something that is now misinterpreted in the time it was said, right? And then there's no context to it. I mean, you can take a clip of a Twitter chat where somebody's responding to somebody, but make it look like it's an actual tweak on. Like, there's some weird stuff that have gone on there that I don't really like, where people are digging into like somebody's comments and
pulling
then taking
out of context. Yes,
and taking it 100% out of context. I mean, the overtly stuff that's just rude or insensitive and stupid, that's easy to pull out, right? But I think from a standpoint of like where it is in time is an interesting thing. It's like I don't want, like, let's just separate this real quick. Like, I'm not talking about like hate speech. That's stupid, right? That doesn't have a place, right? But I'm talking about ideas and concepts that at the point in time in history that it was, you don't necessarily want to throw away or just get rid of because like, oh, well, we learned a ton more since 2009. Well, if we erase 2009 in 2039, somebody that's sitting there trying to research something or understand a topic better doesn't have that point, and they were born in 2020, right? And I think that is a disservice to the future part. But I think from a brand perspective, you should be cautious. Like I watch Wendy's on Twitter, and then like McDonald's and Burger King all seem to like jab at each other. And sometimes I like cringe. I'm like, who's running? I mean, that's a giant brand. And I'm like, you're getting pretty close to a line where you're like, there's this thing about like being funny and like being like a little rough and tumble, I guess the best way I could probably put it. You're not being rude, but you're just being direct. And I'm like, you're straddling the line. I find it amusing, but I could also see a lot of people jumping on it and being like, what the heck are you talking about? Plus, you don't know who's on the other side. And I always like, don't be rude. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
And don't put writing if your mother was going to see it. Right.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that. I used to say it was the MBJ rule. Don't say if your mother's going to see it, if it's going to go on a billboard, or you got to say it in front of a judge.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I just think like that common sense part, when you're on the internet, people lost. And I think the anonymous part makes certain aspects of the communication on the internet really good. And I also think it's Achilles heel and also really bad. Right.
Yeah.
And I think you have both sides, but you have to take the good with the bad in anything. And it's just finding a balance. But I don't think I think brands and people, I tell college students all the time once they graduate and they ask me like any piece of advice, I'm like, take an hour on a Saturday or a Sunday and go through all your social media accounts. And you know what? Download the pictures you want to keep of you doing like a keg stand or something on a Saturday and keep that to yourself. Like off Instagram, get it off Facebook, because you don't know like how somebody's going to interpret that, even if it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And it's like, you know what? A really good thing for you to do is every 4 years, maybe just go in and delete all your tweets. Like, do you sit around and read your Twitter account? No, but somebody else might, and somebody else might form an opinion that was you 8 years ago that isn't necessarily even bad. It's just like, well, this guy was crazy in 2013 and it's 2021. Like, well, does that have anything to do with anybody? So that's like, get off my soapbox. I could probably talk about that for like 2-3 days straight.
Well, thank you. That's very insightful. So I got a couple of surprise questions for you, but before we do that, where can people find you?
Sure. I mean, the easiest place to go is badrhinoinc.com. If you search Bad Rhino social media or digital marketing, you'll find us everywhere. We have a great YouTube channel that kind of talks to us, talks about us and who we are. But it's just badrhinoinc.com. All the social channels are Bad Rhino Inc. And find us there. If I'm not hard to find on LinkedIn or anything like that. And if you have any direct questions and you see this, just shoot me an email at info@badrhinoinc.com. Someone will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time, and we'll go from there.
And before I get to those last questions, thank you so much, Marty. This has been brought to you by Firebelly, where we make brands more likable and profitable through social media. If you'd like to establish your brand, expand your reach, get better ROI, let's talk firebellymarketing.com. So I'm wondering, Marty, like, what is your, I'm just rapid fire some questions. What's your favorite thing to drink?
My favorite thing to drink, that changes. It's water mostly. I mean, I need that, right? But in terms of like alcoholic beverages, in the winter, I like a nice like old fashioned every once in a while, or a little more than every once in a while. In terms of like beer, I'm really big on Pilsners right now. And then summertime, I don't drink as much beer. I usually have like vodka drink or something like that. Been really big on, if you're familiar with the brand High Noon, which is just, vodka and soda, 100 calories and tastes really good. It's a little more refreshing.
I know, Marty, I remember the disappointment I felt. I thought I was doing intermittent fasting last time I saw you. And then you were like, well, what do you drink in the morning? And I said, coffee with cream. And I'm like, you're not intermittent fasting. That cream's got calories in it. But what kind of music do you like to listen to?
I'm all over the map. It really depends on the day. I like a lot of 90s hip hop. I kind of grew up on it a little bit. But then like outside of that, I'm a big fan of the band Fish. I've seen them over 100 times, and
That's
I'm
awesome.
missing them. They're actually in Hershey tonight, and they were last night. I'm not seeing as many shows. I'm kind of a little bummed out. Just timing doesn't work with work stuff right now. And then we'll catch up there. But I'd like to see them live. It's fun. I miss it so much just from everything else that was going on. Just didn't get a chance, and it's a spot where I just forget about life and just kind of hang out. But music wise, like last night I was listening to a lot of just different classical music on Spotify channel. I like to listen to a lot of different things. One of the things that's funny is I was at my business partner's wedding back in June. And one of his friends just said, oh yeah, well, what do you like in music? I'm like, I listen to all sorts of things. And I was like, even like, newer stuff, whatever. I like to just put it on, just listen to different, concepts, ideas. And he started asking me, I'm like, I realized like when you're on Spotify, I rarely look down and see what it is. Right? I just let it play. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Sometimes I'll go back and be like, damn it, what was that song? And who was the artist or whatever? And I have no idea. I have to go back and look at my history every once in a while, which isn't the easiest thing to do. And I have other stuff to do. So I just wind up like playing things. I've got to get better at that, because there's like a lot of,
you got to hit the like button when you hear it.
I know.
Don't bother about who it is.
I know. I forget like to even do that. Like, my fitness apps and my trainers, same way. Like I have all this stuff. It's great. It's on an app. It's got everything. And he's like, can you actually input this stuff? And I'm like, damn it, that's right. You got to do that.
So, okay. So greatest rapper ever, alive or dead?
Oh man, that's a tough one. So I love Tupac. I always have. I got a better appreciation as I got older for it as well. That to me, like, it combines so many different elements of different music. But I always was like a big fan, and it got better and better. And then as I've gotten older, like going back through like a lot of his other stuff that I never really heard or really dove into, I'm like, give me a greater appreciation of like his artistry around it and what he actually pulled together. I can, I've always been a big Biggie fan. Like just that whole kind of like area in time was really interesting because of the different cultures kind of coming together, going different directions. But then like there's some wild stuff that went on just in the industry too, that from a business perspective, you're interested in. And you're like, what the heck is actually going on? And then you look at like the whole thing, and I'm by no means like a history expert, but more and more about, 90s hip hop or any hip hop. But when I go back and I start looking at it, it's fascinating to me, like the whole genre and then everything that came about and then like different things that have come out of it over the years has been really interesting to me. I do find myself getting caught up in it and I have to like stop and I'm like, it's on my like one of the lists. Like I have a list that I wrote and it's like when you have downtime, what do you want to do rather than trying to like
Figure it
scroll
out.
through
Yeah.
something? Oh, I want to learn about this. And that's one of the things I want to learn more of because when you were, the first time I was like, 14, even probably younger than that, 13, you listened to like something like Public Enemy and NWA was coming out, like all this stuff. It was like different things and growing up with people that, I were friends with and growing up, it wasn't like it was just all one culture versus another. We were all like, there's a lot of people that I grew up with was like introducing me to different things and vice versa. And, it's funny is like when you have those types of relationships, you'll get a text and they'll be like, hey man, like, and the weirdest thing, I can't really like say it because it'll sound really weird on a podcast, but like a buddy of mine just sends me a text. He's like, hey, I finally listened to whatever it was. And you just start laughing because I'll be like, hey, I finally listened to like that other EPMD album that you always told me to listen to. And we were just like laughing about it via text and like when we get together. And that's always interesting to me is like learning new things like that and coming from different perspectives.
And podcasts? Yes, no, you love podcasts?
Yeah, probably too many of them. I've cut back a lot. I've been listening to more fun podcasts and like more humor, just comedian podcasts. The one that it's a Two Bears, One Cave, which is Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. And I kind of go in spurts. Like I'll listen to like one podcast for like a lot of episodes, then I'll switch and then I'll just try different ones. But it's like you can only consume so much content, right? And I try and do that via audible books and then podcasts. And then I'm always listening to podcasts on like 3x speed too, sitting on the treadmill or bike or just trying to get through them too, trying to get the information.
What's one thing that no one knows about you?
What's one thing that no one knows? I don't share this very often. I hate the sound of people chewing. And, right?
I love it.
There's a name for it, but I've had dinners where I can get through it. Like most of the time, it doesn't bother me. When it bothers me, it's soul removing from me. And I've had dinners where I've been at like groups of people where I've gotten up and you can just tell like there's something wrong. I've gotten up and had to leave like for a little while and then come back. And then it's like afterwards people, and I'm like, oh, nothing fine. Like, no, it didn't look like you were fine. I'm like, no, I wasn't. Like it gets under my skin so bad that it just like hurts like physically.
It's so interesting because I know a guy. He's probably like mid-30s. His dad is early 60s, and his son is I think 12, and they're all chompers, man. They chomp and they eat very loudly. Now the daughter doesn't do it, and other members of the family don't do it, but some kind of male gene thing, they all like chomp really loudly. Well, Marty, thank you so much for sharing so much of your time and about yourself. And, thank you for making the world a better place and, all the great work that you do with Bad Rhino. Everyone, don't forget, if you want to check him out, Marty McDonald, he's very transparent. He's everywhere on social, badrhinoinc.com. And thank you for listening to the Firebelly Social Show.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.